Hello, ladies, and welcome to the Beauty Shaman. So today I have my monthly conversation with the absolutely wonderful Natha Campanella, astrologer, who I know hopefully all of you are really getting into this and just how smart and, full of great information Natha is. So thank you, Natha, for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. That's a good intro, Susan.
Well, I just so enjoy our chats. They're
Me
so
too.
so great and informative. So, ladies, today we normally we talk about the month. Like every month we have a topic. We talk about that month and what's going on in astrology, but there's not much going on in May. May is sort of boring, I guess. So we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the basics of astrology. So some really basic things. And I don't know about you, but this really helps me because I find astrology very confusing, and I try hard to understand it, but ultimately I have to rely on people like Natha because I can't make heads and tails out of most of it. So Natha, let's just start with the elements. So there's air, fire, earth, and water in the elements. And that's kind of a basic starting point for astrology, which is not what I would have thought as a basic starting point. So why don't you launch into what that means and why that's a starting point?
Yeah, so there are obviously different modalities have different versions of the elements, but in astrology, we look to four elements. So we start with fire, and we can sort of describe the elements in turn. We can kind of give them like human characteristics. So the fire people tend to be action oriented. It is there's a lot of sort of acting first before thinking that happens with fire. We say what you see is what you get with fire, and that's really true. We know fire burns, and we know if we touch it that it's going to hurt us, and yet it's very captivating, it's exciting, it's warming, even hot and like passionate. And so all of the fire signs, and that's Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, those are all the real action oriented signs. They tend to be more assertive, they tend to be more aggressive, and they tend to just have more energy and vibrancy. And then we move into the earth signs, and the earth signs are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And earth, of course, grounded, right? So earth signs tend to come from a place of logic. They tend to really want security and stability, and they want to know what to predict, how things are going to happen. They tend to be immovable in different ways. All three of them are immovable in, ways that are specific to them. But, and we all have all of these signs in our natal chart. So we all, even if your sun sign is not in earth or fire or air or water, you're still going to have pieces of that within you. So, know that there will be places within you that are logical and, very grounded and are slow to change your mind. And then you also have these passionate, vibrant places. And so then, we move on to air, and air is the intellect. It's all about the way that we think, the way that we process, the way that we connect with people through conversation. The air signs are Gemini and Libra and Aquarius. And so all three of those signs, and this is true for all of the signs in the zodiac, they all sort of come to the table with a different approach, but they're all approaching, in this case, the air signs are approaching through the intellect. So there's a lot of thinking and processing and spinning, and maybe not as much action, right? As we all know that there are places in our lives where we get really caught in, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And we never really move into action. We're not able to capture our fire and sort of push through. And the same with earth. Sometimes we get so busy, like really thinking things through and wanting to go slowly and wanting to really know what the outcome is going to be, that we don't harness our fire and keep it moving. And so all of the elements they all interact with each other, doing different things, different combinations, bring out different, results. And then we move on to water. And water signs
Water.
are the emotional signs. Yeah, I was
I'm a
looking before
water.
we started talking, and you have a Pisces sun. And so water signs are the emotional ones. They are the ones that have the capacity to really, they relate to the world through feeling. And so, they sort of make their decisions based on what it feels like. And also with water comes intuition. It comes with things like compassion and empathy. And so you can see how like all four, and by the way, the water signs are Cancer and God,
Pisces.
why am I drawing a blank? Scorpio and Pisces.
Yes, Pisces. Yeah, great. That's actually really
Yeah. So
cool.
Suzanne, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think that's all really helpful. I mean, I'm obviously a Pisces, but I was going through my mind when you were talking about it of the people that I know that are those different signs and how it does fit, it really does. And I have a daughter who's an Aries and she's like super like, she'll just be really aggressive. And I'm like, whoa, because I'm all like, you know, empathetic and feeling and I'm like, whoa, she's very, but that's part of her makeup. And that's what makes her so brilliant too, is that she is very aggressive and assertive. I really love that about her. So I think each one obviously has its strengths and then there's weaknesses that go along with every single one of them. Correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
It's
it's
like with
how we work.
anything.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's like with anything in life, but we see this in astrology all the time, is that there's always duality, right? There's always a high side and a low side, and places where, we wish that we could do it better or differently. And then places, I call them the burdens and the gifts.
Yeah.
And that's just part of life, is really trying to balance out your burdens and your gifts and figure out, where can I be more assertive and where do I need to be like less aggressive,
Right.
you know?
Yes, exactly. And I think that's one of the great gifts of astrology is teaching us what those are and helping us come into contact with it and actually make decisions about it as opposed to just being sort of railroaded by life. And the first time I ever had an astrology appointment with a gentleman, I had never had anybody explain so clearly my personality and my character. I was like, holy cow. I mean, it was very startling. So I think, but helpful, because I was like, yeah, that is my dark side. And, it was really interesting how much it clarified that. So that's one of the things I love about astrology. But let's go on to there's the sun sign, the moon sign, and the rising. And so let's talk about how those work, because people get really confused. They're like, I know my sun sign, but I don't understand how the moon fits in there and my rising fits in there, and they get very muddled, including yours truly, even though I know my sun, moon, and rising. So maybe you could just go into what those mean and how how that kind of fits together.
Yeah. I mean, the natal chart is the map of where the planets were in the sky at the time of your birth. And so we all have a natal chart. And within the natal chart, there are so many different planets and houses and signs and points. So astrology is a really, really big map, and it's a little bit hard for the layman to just sort of dive in and instantly understand. But the reason that I wanted to talk about the sun, the moon, and the rising today is because that's sort of astrology 101. Because the sun, the moon, and the rising are the most personal point and planets in the zodiac. So, we all know our sun signs. That is where the sun was when we were born. So depending on, what month we were in, you have a Pisces sun, I have a Taurus sun. The sun is about, who we really are in our very core. And really, even more than that, our sun sign talks about the very things that we need to give ourselves and feed ourselves and sort of lavish on ourselves in order to really be our most vibrant, best selves. And so to give you an example, Pisces sun, Pisces is a water sign. And so therefore there's a lot of emotional capacity. And Pisces is also a sign that is ruled by the planet Neptune. So there's a lot of mystical, magical, even connection to like the spiritual world and the metaphysical realms that come along with Pisces. So we could say that for you, that in order to really be to sort of live your best life, as they say, that it's really important that you feed yourself with Pisces things. So you want to cultivate a life of the spirit. You want to have some sort of spiritual practice. You want to really allow yourself to rest and relax, because that's another real Pisces thing, is that Pisces is so porous and so soft that oftentimes Pisces people get very overwhelmed with the world at large, because you're not just immersed in your own stuff, you're feeling everybody else's stuff. So, Pisces people need to rest, they need to relax, they need to give themselves ample time to just space out and fantasize and just sort of, allow your mind to roam and sort of go into those invisible realms and really, like I said, cultivate a life of spirit, whatever that means. And so I'm curious, does that resonate with you?
Oh my God, totally. Yeah. And now and again, I get into, this workaholic mode of I've got to do. And I just fall flat, which I just experienced burnout. We were talking
Yes.
before I turned record on. And it's because I didn't give myself the time that I needed to do that, to just space out and go, wait, why do I feel so drained? And, and I kind of was like, gosh, I feel drained, but I got to do all these things. And I've done this periodically throughout my life. So I'm still learning this lesson, obviously, to stop and go, okay, wait a minute, just check out, spend time. And what I love to do, the things that nourish me, is I love to sit and read. And to read spiritual books, or books that really just resonate with my heart, and I can ponder and I can take notes and really get in touch with what's going on. And so I did, I took a month off from kind of posting just about anything really, and just kind of focused on those things. And now I feel so much more revived. And it's interesting. And I think if every sign learns that, it's such a valuable thing to tap into, rather than blaming your world like everybody else, which is one of our temptations, is to stop and go, no, I'm in charge of my own life here, and really being able to question what's working and what's not working for me.
Yeah. I mean, that's the good thing about doing any sort of self-reflective work, is that it's always about coming back into question what's working here. And because the truth is that we just don't see ourselves very clearly.
Yeah.
Nobody does. We think we do, because we're spending all this time with ourselves, and we do have some firm ideas of who we are, but we don't really know what's going on. And sometimes we need the objectivity of somebody else, of some, say an astrology reading, or even any other kind of, even talking with a good friend or a child who's, when you're like, what do you see? And they can say, God, I can see that you're just burned out.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's like, oh God, you're right, I am.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I love, I have two teenage daughters, and all I have to do is ask them, what do you think's going on with me now? It's so interesting, because they'll go, oh, Mom, you're just working too much, and you need to play more, and you need a date, or they'll throw these things out, and I'm like, oh my God, they see it, but I'm lost in the middle, because I'm water too, right? I'm lost in it. And I think
Totally.
It's so valuable to have people around you that really have a clear perspective, and generally our significant other and our children. I don't know about you, but those are great resources for me, and as well as best friends and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. So, if anyone is listening and they're like, what do I need, what do I need to really feed myself and lavish upon myself, and you don't know, ask somebody close to you and see what they have to say.
Or call Natha Campanella.com, right? And go,
yeah.
I'm a little lost.
Or get a reading, because
That
there
totally
is just so much wisdom to be found.
So let's move on to moon.
Yeah.
Right? Is it moon you want to go to next, or rising? You decide which one you want to head in.
It doesn't matter. We can go with moon. Moon is about our emotions and our emotional intelligence, and the way that we relate to the world through the lens of emotions. So we all have a moon sign. And what's interesting is that our moon sign can be really quite different than our sun sign. And, I was looking at your chart, and your moon is in the sign of Aries.
Yeah, totally.
And
different.
So, the way that you express yourself emotionally, the things that you need in order to feel emotionally secure, are actually quite different than what you need in order to feel like, okay, I can be my best life. And yet at the same time, they're in relationship. So there's still two pieces of the puzzle. With an Aries moon, this is somebody that, you need to be able to express yourself. Repressing things like anger are going to be long-term. That's going to be really detrimental. Aries, like I said earlier, is a sign of passion and impulse, and, has things that want to come up and out. And if you're not doing that with an Aries moon, then, you start to get things like depression. where you're just like, oh, I'm so flat and I don't know quite how to make this, how to like boost myself up again. And so I think that's something for all of us with our moons, whatever our moons are, is that it's really important also to feed our moons with what we need. You know, I have a Pisces moon. So everything that I just said for you when it comes to your sun is what I have to do for myself emotionally. I get totally unbalanced and, you know, anxious really if I am not like taking time to chill out and rest and relax. And I would imagine that you struggle, and I want to get your feedback. I would imagine that you struggle when you are trying to repress emotions and you're not being able to like assert what you need. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. And I got a little depressed, you know, during my sort of funk, you know, recently,
Mm-hmm.
like I didn't know what was wrong with me. And some of it was anger. I had anger, and I find anger, and it was towards some stuff going on in my personal life. And, you know, I don't do anger very well. And I think maybe that's also a cultural thing for women. Often we're taught not to be angry and to be, you know, more passive and submissive. And there's kind of this cultural identity around what it means to be feminine that sort of comes up through the grading, so to speak, of my life. Even though I don't agree with that, I still watch it in myself. And I think that's what happened, is I just wasn't expressing some anger towards a certain person. And not that I needed to express it to that person, because it was ineffective and I knew that, but I didn't know what to do with it. It was like, I'm really pissed and I can't figure it out. And so anyway, I did figure out how to express it on my own. I, you know, got it out kind of, and then I was able to deal with the situation in a much more kind of sensible way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like you did exactly what, you know, was appropriate, right? We can't always just explode all over people, and we can't always come with our pitchforks and burn their house down. But, you know, certainly we can figure out like, oh, I'm so angry.
Yeah.
And, you know, whether it means like we're just having like animated conversations with a best friend, or we're whacking a pillow on the bed or something, like it's really important to get that up and out.
Get it
So,
out. Exactly. So we got to pay attention
yeah.
to our moon as far as expression, right? Did I get that basically
Yes.
right? Yes. Okay. What
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
rising sign?
So the rising sign is a point. It's not a planet. It's the sign. It's also called the ascendant. And it's essentially the sign that was on the horizon when you were born. And so that people perceive us. And so where the sun and the moon are sort of internal, um, they're all about us. The rising is sort of about what people see when they first meet us. And oftentimes we can, you know, our rising sign sort of turns into what we allow people to see, what we show them, you know. So it can be our facade, can be our mask, can be our, you know, even our defense mechanisms, really. And so depending on your rising, it's sort of like that's how people perceive you. So your rising is Scorpio,
Mm,
and that's another water sign.
yeah.
And, you know, Scorpio rising, Scorpio is the water signs are all relatively hard to read because it's emotions,
Yeah.
and it's so, you know, emotions are ever changing and shifting. And so we could say that when people first meet you, that they might have a hard time initially knowing who you are. Sometimes with Scorpio can be intimidating.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know whether this is true for you, Suzanne, or not, but when I see people that have a strong Scorpio on their ascendant, I oftentimes, when I ask them, I oftentimes find that they have been, people project onto them a lot, whether it be true or not. So sometimes, and there often can be jealousy involved, where people see you and you sort of mirror back to them the things that they wish that they had in their life, which can be intimidating. Or sometimes they see, you know, a Scorpio rising person can also pull in people that want to like share their stories with them, because there's this sense with Scorpio where there's not judgment. And so I'm just curious, does that show up for you?
Oh, totally. And I've
All
had
of that?
people say to me, you know, you're very hard to read, you know,
Yeah.
initially. And I think they have to get to know me a little bit. And I'm always, first, before I knew all this, I thought, God, I'm trying so hard to be relatable and open and, you know, all this stuff. And I couldn't understand it, but I've realized that it's more how they see themselves that comes out.
Yes.
So if they're insecure, they'll automatically, and it's interesting because I'm actually working with a talent today who's very insecure. It's a woman. And so I thought, okay, what do I need to do here to help her out? Because I think sometimes if I show up and I'm too sort of glamorous, I can tell she kind of implodes a little bit, like, oh no, I have to go in front of the camera. And so today I'm like flat shoes, skirt, everything's very straight. I'm not made up very much. It's like, okay, really conservative, because that'll help her, because she does project onto me, not in a negative way, but it makes her feel bad. And I don't want her to feel bad. So it's interesting, having that knowledge has kind of empowered me to be able to go along with, what needs to happen. And then I have friends that are super confident, that don't project, that are aware enough. And so, man, we get down, we kind of go crazy because there's not that there. So yeah, no, I think it's totally true. And I mean, as I'm relaying all this, I realize how incredibly powerful it is to have that awareness of why people react to us the way that they do. And I think the audience maybe can go, yeah, I don't know why people react like this to me. So, I mean, I think this is where the rising is really helpful.
Oh, very. I mean, to know your rising sign, my rising sign is Capricorn, and Capricorn is very boundaried. And I have gotten feedback many times over my life that I initially seem really standoffish and kind of skeptical. And I always thought, well, God, I'm so like soft and sweet on the inside. Like, what is that about? And then I learned about Capricorn, and it was like, oh yeah, that's true. I do initially, and sometimes it's just straight up being shy. But, there is sort of this, and with anybody with Capricorn or Saturn near their rising, there's this sort of like initial, like, I'm not just going to burst forth. Whereas somebody, for example, with, let's say, Leo on the rising, Leo is fire sign, and it's effusive, and it wants to be popular, and it's lovable. And those tend to be the people that, those of us that are a little bit more shy and hold ourselves back, we watch these other people kind of burst into the room and just get the instant admiration. And that is oftentimes due to, a really juicy fire sign on the rise, or, like the planet Jupiter, which is also a fire planet. So it's really cool. I think, it's just another access point to really figuring out who the heck you are.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And I was thinking about when I worked in Washington, D.C., and I worked with politicians for CNN and Fox doing makeup. And some of these guys would walk in, they're so warm and vivacious, and they're great on camera, and they're super likable. And they, then have their dark side was like underhanded and deceit and like all this stuff, right? That's kind of the typical politician, unfortunately. But, that makes total sense to me, that they just possess that. And I don't really possess it. I'm more like you. I'm more kind of reserved, right? Initially. And I'm very watchful, and I'm checking, and I don't mean to be, but that's just how I operate. So no, I think that's really great. And I'm like connecting all the dots here with a lot of people that I know. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said earlier, astrology is a massive map, and we all have all of these different things somewhere. And so that is why, we aren't totally robotic, predictable people. We all have a dark, shadowy side. We all have a rigid, boundaried side. We all have, a demanding, bossy side, and we're all shy. And it just sort of depends on the combination that we get in our chart. And then, of course, the situations and people that we're around. And so it's really cool when we look at it like through that lens.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate this conversation. I've loved it. I mean, I kind of knew quite a bit of that because of my own astrology, but I love it because it just kind of affirms, and it helps me affirm more. Just, I love astrology, and just to use it in your everyday life. It's super practical. And I have this kind of conviction about spirituality and anything like astrology, or that we use as a tool. That needs to be super practical. We can't get lost in the intellect of it. We have to use it in our practical life. And it feels like we really can.
Yeah, exactly. It's not, if you find yourself getting an astrology reading with somebody that's telling you that everything is exactly the way that they're saying it is, I would say that's not a good astrologer, because it's so dynamic. It's so, there's a million different interpretations for everything. And what a good astrologer does is finds the right interpretation for you, that sort of opens up your, sort of opens that door for you into knowing yourself.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you, Natha, for sharing all this today on our kind of basics of astrology. So, ladies, I hope that all of you have really gotten some great information from this. I think astrology is a wonderful tool to use. And if you have any questions about astrology, please go to nathacampanella.com. It's down in I'll put it in the lower thirds there, and also below in the credits so that you can access Natha and her beautiful website and all her great information. So thank you so much, Natha, for joining me today on The Beauty Shaman.
Oh, my pleasure. I'll talk to you next month.
That's right. And thanks, ladies, for watching The Beauty Shaman. Have an awesome day.